Hello and welcome to this edition of our special program To The Point. Today we have with us a veteran parliamentarian and Congress's tribal face from Andhra Pradesh, Union Minister for Tribal Affairs and Panchayati Raj, Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First of all, we'll talk about one of the ministries which you are in charge of, that's Panchayati Raj. Now, this particular ministry was established in 2004. It has been almost around 8 years since this ministry has been, conceptualized, and you've been at the helm of the affairs since last 1 year. Give us an overview as to what are the programs for different Panchayati Raj institutions in the country which your ministry runs.
You see, as you're aware, Panchayat Raj is a concurrent list subject. Every state has its own Panchayat Raj Act, and we from here actually monitor. We advise them, we issue guidelines, we send a certain amount of funds, but ultimately the implementation is done by the respective state governments as far as the Panchayat Rajas are concerned.
One very pertinent question when it comes to panchayats in the country is that this particular system was envisaged by the founding fathers of our country as the basis of the entire democratic system we have. And somewhere in 90s, this particular system was given a constitutional authority. There are more than 240,000 panchayats in our country, but there are at least 60,000 of them still don't have a place to function from, or a simple infrastructure like building, or posts like a chowkidar to ensure that they function smoothly.
Yes, I think one of the main functions is to strengthen the Panchayat Raj institutions. Strengthening means to first strengthen the infrastructure, and infrastructure includes not only buildings but also personnel to manage them. You are right, there are about 60,000 out of the nearly 240,000 panchayats which do not have buildings. Now, for many of these panchayats which do not have buildings, especially in the IAP districts and in the LWE districts, already we are giving, centers giving some kind of contribution. The Ministry of Rural Development from the NREGA funds is giving 75% of the money, whereas the state government will have to pay 25%. As I mentioned, this being a subject where the responsibility lies with the state government also, the state governments will have to cooperate. We from our side are trying to do our best. My intention is to be able to provide a building for every panchayat as early as possible, and to also provide some kind of assistance from here for personnel. So, my personal view is that there should be one panchayat development officer or secretary, however they are called in different states, one technical officer meaning an engineer, and another person who can be the accountant and operate the computers also. But this will again have to be on a sharing basis, and if the state governments are willing to cooperate and give at least 50%, then we will be willing to give a certain part of that the salaries to ensure that this is there in every panchayat in the country.
When talking about revenues, one of the reports of the standing committee on rural development says that a lot more needs to be done to ensure that panchayat institutions are made more viable in this nation. Is it the lack of funds, or is it the lack of the utilization of those funds, or there is a lacuna in the entire utilization process altogether?
No, it's not a lacuna in the funds or its utilization. Basically, for Panchayat Raj institutions to be effective, as I had earlier mentioned, you have to have the infrastructure, you will have to have the personnel. Secondly, you see, once the amendment to the constitution came in mid-90s in 1993, all states were required to devolve powers to the Panchayat Raj institutions. There are 29 items which the state governments are supposed to devolve. Now, while the states are very, very particular and keen about the center devolving powers to the states, many of the states have not been devolving the 3 Fs. 3 Fs means the funds, functionaries, and the funds, the functionaries and the functions to these panchayats. Now, this has been different in every state. I think Kerala and West Bengal have done quite well. Karnataka and Maharashtra also have devolved some of these functions, funds and functionaries to the panchayats, but a lot remains to be done. And unless these subjects are devolved or decentralized by the state governments to the Panchayat Raj institutions, this complaint will always be there. Panchayat Raj institutions, to be effective and to deliver what they are required to do, will also have to have this backup from their respective state governments.
What about holding regular elections to the panchayat? Because that is one area which is still considered a grey area by many committees, subcommittees, standing committees. They have pointed out time and again that regular elections should be held for panchayats. Although it's a state subject, but you are in charge of the ministry at the center out here. Any strong proposal being mooted to ensure that the regular elections are held?
I think already there's a constitutional mandate, it's a constitutional mandate that states will have to hold Panchayat Raj elections within 6 months after the term expires. And if they do not hold it within that 6 months, then the center will be constrained to withhold funds which go from the central government. I think now most of the states have held their Panchayat Raj elections. Jammu and Kashmir had elections almost after a decade. Jharkhand did not have elections for 32 years. They've had elections now, though they've yet to devolve any powers to the Panchayat Raj institutions. And unfortunately, in my own state of Andhra Pradesh, elections have not been held now for more than 6 months, but this is also due to a stay which was granted by the High Court. We have advised the state government to vacate the stay and to hold elections immediately or as early as possible.
And what about the participation of women in the entire Panchayati Raj system? Because that was one of the dreams of our founding fathers when this entire concept was being cleared. And in the recent past, we've seen women taking active part. But is it a reality that women who are at the panchayat level do get to play an active role?
Well, I think this differs from state to state. In fact, some states already there's a reservation of more than 50% for women in Panchayat Raj institutions. But as I told you, as far as the functioning of earlier there were complaints that they would be remote controlled by the husbands or by the relatives and so on and so forth. This may have been the case initially in some states, but in my state and many of the southern states, we find that the women are asserting, they are doing quite well and they are very, very competent. And it's also very encouraging and heartening to find that many young, educated women, ladies from the village panchayats are now coming forward to take charge of their respective areas. It may not be the same in some other state, as I told you, it differs from state to state. So I think what we need to do is to create this awareness, give them a proper opportunity. And I am sure it will not take very long before women will be able to play a very active role in their respective panchayats.
We'll take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll ask Mr. Kishore Chandra Deo about the second most important responsibility he has as a union minister, that's tribal affairs. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo, Union Minister for Tribal Affairs and Panchayati Raj, is still with us. Sir, now coming to Tribal Affairs Ministry. It was in 2006 that the UPA government brought in the Forest Rights Act. It was considered to be a path-breaking act for the tribals of this country. But in the recent past and in last few years, there have been sustained complaints about the implementation of this act. For example, the rejection of claims, the percentage of rejection of claims is very high, it's around 60%. How do you go ahead and seek to address these issues, given the fact that you were yourself chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee when this particular act was referred to it?
You see, in fact, the implementation of the act began in the year 2008. So, it's hardly 4 years since the implementation started. Now again, the implementation is done by the respective state governments. But you are right when you say that there have been a large number of rejections. So in fact, I have been going into this aspect, I have been getting inputs. And you see, this is a continuing process, because only by experience we get to know where the difficulties are, what the impediments are. And once these are known, that you see, we are better placed to take decisions that would undo the kind of situation which has arisen out of certain obstacles that may have arisen.
There were several suggestions which were given by the National Advisory Council headed by the Congress President Sonia Gandhi, and those suggestions specifically deal with going ahead and plugging these loopholes in the implementation. They talk about amending the rules and all. How soon do you think the government can go ahead and implement those suggestions and several others which the ministry might have got?
Well, the NAC had sent a set of recommendations, and apart from the recommendations of the NAC, I have also been getting other inputs from various voluntary organizations, from tribal organizations from different parts of the country. Well, I have studied this myself. I have come to some kind of a conclusion regarding what changes need to be made immediately, and some changes will have to be made by the rules itself. In some cases, we will have to issue certain guidelines under certain sections of the Act. So, in fact, the ministry had gone into this exercise, and at present its matter is pending with the law ministry. As soon as it gets back from there, I think the changes will be on board. I don't think it's going to take very long from now.
Will it be possible for you and your ministry to ensure that it gets done in this particular session?
Well, as far as the session is concerned, the session will have to be on only when it comes to amendment if it's required. So, if there is a small amendment that is required, if it is not possible in this session, it will come in the way, it will surely come in the monsoon session. But as far as the other changes which are to be made in the rules are concerned, which are to be made in the guidelines are concerned, it is not necessary that a parliament is in session when that process is on.
And what about the national tribal policy? This has been this idea has been doing round for quite some years now. Is there any concrete formation on that as well?
Well, there was a national tribal policy which was put on the website by my, not my immediate predecessor, by Mr. Kindia when he was the minister. But I found that, you see now after a lapse of a few years, I find that probably we need to revisit that proposed policy which was put on the website. You see, tribal policy has to be focused, it has to be comprehensive. I am working on it, and I think we will finish that in that process in a couple of months' time at the most.
Now to the big question. According to the Prime Minister himself, Naxal violence is the biggest challenge and the threat this country is facing right now. And most of the strongholds of Naxals are in tribal dominated areas. Is this a mere coincidence?
No, I don't think it's merely a coincidence. It's a fact that tribals have not got their due. I'm not going to blame anybody for it. For example, the Forest Right Act, I think it was due maybe 100 years ago, but it was the UPA government which took the initiative, and this is one of our flagship programs, and that will at least settle the pre-existing rights of tribals who've been living in these areas and eking out a sustainable source of livelihood for themselves for not only decades or maybe for centuries. The next question is the minerals that are available in these areas. I think a policy will have to be evolved, but because I think the tribals who are the original inhabitants of this land are stakeholders in these rich minerals which are deposits which are available in these areas. So, these we will have to take a call on all these issues, ensure that there is a proper development that takes place, and once they get the right share, I think the other problem will also be contained simultaneously.
Just last month you made a statement and you raised your voice with regard to that particular statement earlier as well with respect to mining in tribal areas, and you specifically said that mining is the biggest threat to the tribals. How do you go ahead and propose to solve this problem, because you were heading the Tribal Affairs Ministry as well?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, it's a mineral rich area, and that's causing a lot of anxiety to the people who are living over there. Anxiety in the sense that you see the threat of being ousted, being driven out of the homeland. See, I am not against mining per se, but that has to be a roadmap as to how this mining should go on. The tribals who are living there, the first precondition is that you have to settle their rights. Even if they agree to your rehabilitation package or to be shifted out or for mining to be allowed over there, the basis on which you are going to compensate them or relocate them is going to be the pattas or the recognition of their rights under the FRA. Secondly, we have something called the PESA, the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas, which comes under the purview of my Panchayat Raj Ministry. But this enactment was made in 1996, where the consent of the tribals are to be taken. So once these processes are gone through, then we will have to have a national mineral policy and then decide how we have to proceed further. But before all this has happened, the threat of mining at this juncture has come as a sort of a big threat to the tribals who are feeling very sort of insecure, and this is a very, very sensitive issue which will have to be dealt with if the extremist issue also has to be contained. So it's not merely a law and order problem. Where there's a law and order problem, it will have to be dealt with as a law and order problem, but alongside we have to get at the root of the basic problems which has caused this unrest.
When it comes to the expenditure, budgetary expenditure of the Tribal Affairs Ministry, some of the experts believe that the percentage of the budgetary expenditure vis-a-vis the allocation has gone down from 2006 to 2010 considerably. Why is that so? Because the money is something which is really important to implement the programs when it comes to the tribal affairs.
Well, you see, actually the amount has not gone down, but as you are right, the percentage may have come down slightly. You see, normally what we do is this: the state government, as I told you, who implement these programs, we give the money to the state governments based on a formula on which we work out each one's share. There is no discrimination at all. But you see, until we get utilization certificates from them, until we get progress reports, we have some constraints about sending further finances and sanctions to these state governments. So sometimes when unused funds remain with us, then you see the next thing that the Planning Commission does is to reduce the allocation for the next year, stating that you have not been able to utilize these funds the previous year. So these are practical problems and difficulties. We've been telling state governments to send us the progress reports, to send us the utilization certificates, to use the money that we've sent them. Many have been responding, but many of them have probably had genuine problems to get this feedback from remote areas, and we are trying to see that this process is hastened up so that financial grants are not cut due to the reason of remaining unspent with us. Second thing is, you see, now for the 12th plan period has just started. We have made our demands with the Planning Commission, and I am hoping that our funds for the Tribal Affairs Ministry will be raised during this period.
We'll take one more short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the home state of Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo, Andhra Pradesh. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Mr. Deo is still with us. Sir, now we'll talk about your home state, the state of Andhra Pradesh, which you represent in Lok Sabha as well. Andhra Pradesh has been in news constantly since last few months, I must say, 1.5 years, over a period of 1.5 years, over the issue of demand of separate state of Telangana. What are your views on this particular demand?
Well, there are several demands in different parts of the country by different groups for a separate state. Now, as far as the Telangana issue is concerned, it's not new demand. This demand is, I think, almost 40 years old. Somehow it has now become the issue has gained momentum. But I would like to mention here, you see, after all, the Telangana demand for Telangana has been mainly concentrated in university campuses by a section of the intelligentsia, maybe some advocates, by some political leaders of different political parties. But nevertheless, it's a problem which has to be addressed, and I think a political decision will have to be taken by the party at the highest level.
Of late, this particular issue has led to parliament proceedings being disrupted by the members of Lok Sabha from the region of Telangana, and some of them are your own party colleagues. Is this a fair way to go ahead and represent the ACU on the floor of the House? One, and two, how do you see the way forward from here, given the fact that your own party members are at the forefront and in the well most of the times?
Well, my party members who were at the well most of the time were finally suspended. This is most unprecedented. This for the first time that ruling party members were obstructing proceedings, and then the leadership did not hesitate to suspend them either. So this is not the way to make a demand for a state or for anything else. You see, Parliament, there is a certain amount of sanctity about Parliament, and these kinds of things cannot be tolerated. And ultimately, you see, the decisions on such issues will have to be taken by the leadership, as I mentioned, at the highest level, in a more sane and quiet and tranquil atmosphere, not under pressure like this. So I am sorry for those colleagues who thought that exerting pressure in this manner would pay dividends, but I think the leadership has been firm and clearly indicated to them that this is not the way to go about doing things.
Another major development in Andhra Pradesh vis-a-vis your party has been, Chiranjeevi's PRP merging with Congress at the state level. How do you see this, benefiting the party in the post-YSR era? Because we've seen two chief ministers after YSR.
Well, you see, Congress has been it's one of the oldest parties, and people from other parties have merged in. Many people may have left, but so many have come back. And Chiranjeevi he formed a political party, but basically he was not affiliated to any political party earlier on. So we welcomed him, and he's in the party now, and surely I think a party will benefit out of his inclusion and presence within us.
2 years to go before UPA 2 completes its term. That would be 10 years of UPA in power. What do you think should be the key areas of priority for the UPA 2 at this point in time? 3 years have gone by.
I think the priorities of the UPA has already been spelled out, and during the last 7-8 years I think we have taken a lot of path breaking measures. It's not just the Forest Right Acts. I think the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme is an innovative scheme. I don't think it is there in any part of the world before it was introduced here in India. Likewise, the right to information. Now you have a lot of activists in that sphere, maybe causing some problems also for the government and others, but the fact is that never before were documents available to the public in the manner that they are now. The right to education bill which we have brought in, the food security bill which is due to come, and several other social security measures which we've taken, I think have paid dividends to us in the year 2009, and will continue with them till 2014.
One last question, sir, that you yourself are a tribal leader. You belong to a tribal family in the area, parliamentary constituency which you represent, Araku. What has been your experience over these years, one, and how do you plan to go ahead and translate that experience into the practical work, since now that you are in charge of the Tribal Affairs Ministry?
Well, as I told you, in my constituency, in my area, a lot of development has been taking place, but I think more developmental work can be done. But again, the thing is, you see, this will have to, ultimately the state governments will have to be proactive. They'll have to carry this forward. We are willing to cooperate with them. We are giving them whatever assistance, central assistance we can, whatever other inputs they need from here. And we've been trying to motivate them. We've been trying to persuade the state governments. Many states have been responding positively and well. And I hope in course of time, we'll be able to carry this message across and ensure that ultimately the answer to the tribal problems is development, to provide them with a decent source of income and livelihood, proper education. Health conditions are very, very poor, and these are things which have my priority, and I'm trying to convince the state governments that they should also go ahead with these programs.
Thank you so much for your time, sir, and thank you for being with us. So this was Mr. V Kishore Chandra Deo, Union Minister for Tribal Affairs and Panchayati Raj. Next time, we'll bring you a new personality on the same show. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.